We're going to try to finish up this portion of our Apologetics series this Sunday. I wanted to do that before a week-long break because nobody's going to remember for 2 weeks what we talked about before, so the pressure's on. But we've ended up, we're trying to decide which God is real. Why do we believe what we believe? We've already spent several weeks determining if there is or is not a God based on the universe that we see around us. We determined that yes, there had to have been a creator to explain our own existence. Well, once you decide there is a God, the next logical question is, which God should we worship? There's 10,000 different choices out there, different religions, different belief systems, different what we would call mythologies. How do we know which religion to adhere to and to follow? Dedicating your life to a God and to serve Him and to put all of your faith in Him, that's a big choice, a big decision. You have only one life to spend, and you better make a good decision on who you're going to follow, because if you make the wrong decision there, everything else falls apart. And so we came up with a couple different criteria on how to decide which is the real God, and I put them up there on the screen for you. Historical interaction. If the God is real, you would expect to see some kind of evidence throughout human history of where this God interacts with humanity. Miracles of the day. Can this God do something supernatural that normal humans cannot do? If He can, then that lends credibility to the fact that He is a genuine supernatural being. Prophecies. Can this being foretell the future? We humans cannot foretell the future. Like I said last week, that's why we have things like lottery and insurance, because it preys upon our inability to foresee what is coming up, right? If you knew what was coming up, you wouldn't buy insurance ahead of time. You'd buy it the day before the tragedy happens, buy the policy, cash in, and then close the policy, and insurance companies go broke. But we can't foresee the future. So if we can find a God who can accurately 100% predict the future, reliably so, then that gives credibility to that God. We've gone through those the last several weeks. We're going to finish up with the last one today, and then we're going to put all these things into practice quickly and see if we've learned anything, okay? We're going to talk today about modern science, the last of our 4 criteria. Now, sure, these evidence that we just talked about, the historical interaction, miracles of the day, and the prophecies, these evidences for the God of the Bible are really impressive, and we went through and we compared the God of the Bible to all the other religions, and there's just no comparison. The Bible's written differently, it's more accurate, it's more comprehensive, it's more detailed than any of the other religions that we compared. But let's face it, all these things happened so long ago. The newest supposed word from this God of the Bible was written nearly 2,000 years ago. If only we had some kind of miracle or prophetic fulfillment that we could actually see today, that would be a lot more convincing, would it not? And I ask that question almost like a rhetorical question, as if I'm demanding a positive response. Yes, of course it would. But I'm not sure that it would. And the reason I say that is all the Bible evidence that we see. We talked a little bit about Elijah last week. Fire on the mountain. Elijah goes up and they build 2 altars, one to the Baals and one to the God of the Bible, to Yahweh. And the priests of Baal, they start dancing around and calling down fire. Oh, Baal, come and set our thingy on fire because we need to prove to everybody that you're real. And they dance around and they're slashing themselves and they're crying and they're chanting. And remember what we said Elijah was doing? He was kicked back in as a lazy boy, munching on some potato chips. He's mocking them. I love that passage. It's so funny. Oh, maybe he's taking a nap. Maybe he's in the outhouse out back. Call louder. Oh, hurry up. Maybe he's on vacation. And he's having a grand old time. He's laughing at them. He's just humiliating them. All day long this goes on. And finally Elijah says, all right, it's time for the evening sacrifices. It's my turn. You've had your fun. Now it's my turn. So he rebuilds the altar. You know the story. They put the bull on, the sticks. He says, bring me some water. Okay, bring me some more water. Okay, bring me some more water till this thing is soaked. They dig a little moat around the altar until it's full of water. And then he prays to the God of the Bible. And you know what happens, right? Wouldn't you like to have been there? Wouldn't that have been a fascinating experience? I don't want to take too much time on my imagination, but if you've ever been close to a lightning strike, have you ever been like kind of close, not like hitting on your head or anything, but close enough to where you can kind of hear the sizzle and the crackle before the actual boom, you know what I mean? And your hairs kind of stand on edge. This is what I've heard. I've not been this close. But your hairs kind of stand on edge as you feel the static charge coming up, and then pow! And that lightning bolt strikes, and something's going to explode. You just know it. It hits a tree, and it just to bits. Or if you've ever seen a YouTube video where it hits like a telephone pole or something, that thing just splinters and blows everywhere. That's kind of how I imagine this happening. Now, we know it was stronger than lightning, Whatever came down, it was stronger than lightning because it ate up the dirt, the rocks, the water. It leaves a whole crater in the ground. This was no ordinary lightning bolt. But that's the best I can think of. But I say all that to say this is an extraordinary display of God's power. I mean, this doesn't happen every day. And that's what it was designed to do, to demonstrate once and for all who is the real God and who is not. Everybody could see that the God of the Bible is the real God, and they'll start chanting what? The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. And they're bouncing up and down, bowing and doing all kinds of stuff. I can only imagine what they were doing. And they took the prophets of Baal down to the valley, and they slaughtered them all. And Elijah was expecting what to come of this event? He prayed it earlier on, if you remember. He said, show everybody that you're the real God so that what? So they will turn their hearts back to you and acknowledge that you're the God. They'll get rid of their Baals and will be worshiping you again. God displayed the power. Did the people respond? They did not. Why not? I'm not sure I can fully answer that question other than to say that acceptance of God is more than just a rational acceptance of information. You can intellectually even agree that God is the God and still reject Him completely. In fact, we've gone through all the evidences of creation and all the other... Well, this whole study we're doing is giving rational reasons why the God of the Bible is sincere, the real one. But it takes more than that to actually accept and believe it. What does James say? Even the demons know that God's the real God, and they understand that this is God's word, so much so that they shudder. Oh, they tremble at His name. But they don't accept or follow or worship Him, they still rebel. And it's the same thing with humanity. So Elijah, he gives fire on the mountain, but the Israelites still don't turn back. In fact, Jezebel turns out hunting him for his life, and he ends up hiding in a cave somewhere, and he's disillusioned, and he's disoriented, and he's confused, and he's afraid, and he's saying, what just happened? We just gave the greatest example of God's power, so visible you cannot miss it. And they're still rejecting, and they're still not following you, and they're still following the Baals. And God comes to him, and you know the story of the wind and the fire and all that kind of stuff, the still small voice. And God says, and Elijah says, look, I'm the only one out here who's still following you. And God says that's not exactly correct, but the point is that it doesn't matter what God does, people will refuse to accept Him. Moses, bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. The order of magnitude of miraculous stuff that happened for that to occur. The 10 plagues, the going through the Red Sea on dry ground, the Mount Sinai experience, the man on the ground, on and on and on. All the things that God showed the Israelites. And they march through the wilderness, and every time they encounter something that's a little bit difficult, they say, what? Oh, if only we were still back in Egypt. Oh, we had it so much better there. Oh, we were so much better off. And they walk all the way to the Jordan River, and they look over to the other side, and there's the Promised Land, and they send the spies across. And the spies look around at the cities, and they come back and they say, ooh, those people are kind of tall, and they look a little bit mean. I don't think we can do this. And we as readers today, reading our Bibles, say what? Come on, say it. You know what you're thinking. Say it out loud. You blockheads, what is your problem? God just decimated the most powerful nation on the planet, Egypt, at the time. He wiped them out. They have no crops. They have no army. They have no building structures because those huge hailstones mashed them. All the firstborn are dead. There's nothing left. I mean, yes, they rebuild, I understand, but at the time, He just wiped them out. The most powerful nation on earth. He opened the sea. He took care of all the other countries whose land you had to walk across to get to the Jordan River. He's babysitting you the whole way. Now you look across there and say, oh, they're a little taller than we are, and He can't handle it? What is wrong with you morons? What's the problem? And again, that's easy for us to say here in the comfort and safety of our auditorium. I understand that. But just seeing the miracles, for some reason, does not convince people. Jesus Himself, right? Jesus does all kinds of miracles as He walks around, healing people, raising people from the dead, feeding 5,000. He raises a guy named Lazarus from the dead, right? And now in John chapter 12, it talks about Jesus is eating at their house, and everybody's coming to see not only Jesus, but it says they're also coming to see Lazarus, who He raised from the dead. Whoa, what a spectacle. This is amazing. We want to come and see it. And the very next verse, John chapter 12, verse 10, it says, the Pharisees wanted to plot and, take care of Jesus, get rid of Him, because everybody's following. But not just they wanted to kill Jesus, they also wanted to kill what? Lazarus. Because he's also demonstrated living proof that Jesus is who He says He is. And so instead of saying, wow, look at all the miraculous stuff He does, clearly he's on God's side because he's doing miraculous stuff. They say, no, we got to get rid of this guy because he's doing too many miracles. And again, we say, what? What's wrong with you idiots? What is your problem? And so I say, kind of as a lengthy introduction today, that I'm not sure that miracles today would really do what we think they would do. I'm not sure that even if God came down in grand style and miraculous power and did something super amazing, would that really turn people back to him? I'm not sure it would. I think they would find a way to discredit it. I think they'd find a way to explain it away, to still reject, and they would follow their own darkness because that's what people like to do. Having said that, sometimes I wish that God would just come down and show everybody once and for all. After I see month after month, year after year of news reports where the bad guys always win and the corruption always continues and bad things happen and the good guys seem to lose, don't I wish every now and then God would just come down and some kind of explosive, miraculous, huge, large scale, knock your socks off sign that he is who he says he is? Yes, I do. I would love to see that in tomorrow's New York Times. God shows us that he is real. I guess we've been wrong after all. And again, that's not how the headline would read, but I'd like to see it. So, would I like to see something that happened today? Yes, I would. And I have some good news for you. Do we have a sign like that? We kind of do. We don't have to just wish for it because we have one. Modern day, amazing stuff that has happened. Where is that, you ask? In one word, it is here. Israel. That's a hard one to deny. It's in the news like every other week, at least, right? Israel. Here's what God said about Israel in his word in ancient times. Genesis chapter 13, verses 14 and 15 says, And the Lord said to Abraham, Now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, westward. For all the land which you see, I will give it to you and your descendants forever. Deuteronomy 1:8. See, I've placed the land before you. This is to the Israelites as they're supposedly going in, as they're getting ready to go in and take over the land. See, I've placed the land before you. Go in and possess the land which the Lord swore to give to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their descendants after them. God promises that this land will be theirs forever. Later on in their history, in Jeremiah, after they've started turning away, and God has promised they would have to be exiled for a while, he says, chapter 29, verse 10, For thus says the Lord, when 70 years have been completed for Babylon, I will visit you and fulfill my good word to you. What good word? That'll be your land forever, right? I will fulfill my good word to you to bring you back to this place. I've got to kick you out for a while because you've been bad, but I will remember my promises to you. Don't worry, I haven't forgot. I will bring you back to this place because I've given this place to you. Ezekiel chapter 37. This is talking even in what to them was the future time, right? Chapter 37, verses 15 to 28. I want to read this to you quickly here. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take a stick and write on it, for Judah and the people of Israel have associated with him. Then take another stick and write on it, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel associated with him. Two halves of a stick, Judah on this half, Israel or Ephraim, or the other 10 tribes, whoever you want to call it, on this half. And join them one to another into one stick. I don't know if you use Gorilla Glue or what he did, that's not the point. That they may become one in your hand. Put them together, tie them, leather them, whatever you do, so that they're one stick now. And when the people say to you, Will you not tell us what you mean by these? Say to them, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am about to take the stick of Joseph, that is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel associated with him, and I will join it with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, that they may be one in my hand. And when the sticks on which you write are in your hand before their eyes, then say to them, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I will take the people of Israel from the nations among which they have gone, and I will gather them from all around, and bring them to their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king over them. And they shall no longer be two nations, and no longer divided into two kingdoms. And they shall not defile themselves any more with their idols and their detestable things, or with any of their transgressions. But I will save them from all their backslidings in which they have sinned, and will cleanse them. And they shall be my people, and I will be their God. And my servant David shall be king over them, and they shall have all one shepherd. And they shall walk in my rules and be careful to obey my statutes, and they shall dwell in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, where your fathers lived. They and their children and their children's children shall dwell there forever. And David my servant shall be their prince forever. And I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it will be an everlasting covenant with them. I will set them in their land and multiply them, and I will set my sanctuary in their midst forevermore. My dwelling place shall be with them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Then the nations will know that I am the Lord, who sanctifies Israel, when my sanctuary is in their midst forever. And in the next couple chapters, in chapters 40 through 48, really, he goes through and he talks about the sanctuary that will be built someday, and he goes to really extraordinary detail, 9 chapters worth of detail of how this temple is to be built and where it's to be located and how the land around it is to be allocated and how everything is to be set up so that someday, in Ezekiel's time, when all the tribes come back together and there's not a north and a south anymore and they're reunified and they're in the land together, and this is how their one king will rule, and this is how everything will look like, and he promises that all these things will happen. Well, if you know your Bible history, you know that the 10 northern tribes were exiled, never to be heard from again, right, throughout history. And Judah also then was exiled. They stayed around after their 70 years. They came back. They rebuilt for a while. Messiah came. Then Rome came in and blasted them again, and they were dispersed for a long time. 1900 years plus, to be exact, they were gone. Now, I have a question for you. If the God of the Bible is the true God, and this is what you read from way back when of what this God says about the nation of Israel, what would you expect to happen to the nation of Israel? If God is real, what would you expect to happen? Empirically speaking, logically, rationally speaking, what would you expect? You'd expect something to happen to Israel. If the God of the Bible is not the true God, what would you expect to happen? Probably nothing. They would dissipate into nothingness, just like countless other cultures have throughout history, right? So the question is, what has happened? People have noticed this throughout history and written about it. Mark Twain kind of famously wrote a little blurb about the Jewish people. Of course, he did his writing before they reformed as a nation in 1948, about how all the other cultures throughout history have been conquered and they dissipated, and you go off and you kind of never hear from them again. But these Jewish people, something is weird about them. They not only cling to their culture and maintain their identity, but they contribute more to society than anybody should expect such a small, minority, fragmented people to do. They contribute more, they're richer, they're smarter, they outperform. What is going on? And Mark Twain was no Bible believer, all right? He was not. He was not a fan of these people. But he says, you just can't deny there's something weird going on here. What would you expect to happen to Israel? I'm going to read. I know some of you get tired when I read, but you just got to see some of this stuff. After the exile by the Romans in 70, what we'd call AD, they call it CE, I understand, the Jewish people migrated to Europe and North Africa. In the diaspora, that is the scattering outside the land of Israel, they established rich cultural and economic lives and contributed greatly to the societies where they lived. Yet they continued their national culture and prayed to return to Israel throughout the centuries. In the first half of the 20th century, there were major waves of immigration of Jews back to Israel from Arab countries and from Europe. During the British rule in Palestine, the Jewish people were subjected to great violence and massacres directed by Arab civilizations or forces neighboring the Arab states. During World War II, the Nazi regime in Germany decimated about 6 million Jews, creating the tragedy of the Holocaust. In 1948, Jewish community in Israel, under the leadership of David Ben-Gurion, reestablished sovereignty over their ancient homeland. The Declaration of Independence of the modern state of Israel was announced on the day that the last British forces left Israel in May 14th of 1948. And after over 1,900 years of being nothing, for some reason the Jews just start coming back to the land. They just start coming back. And then Hitler, who thought he was going to wipe out the Jews once and for all, and he did a fairly good job, but those that were left, they started swarming back out of Europe over to Israel too, saying, hey, look, we've had enough of this. We got to go somewhere where we can actually survive. And they all started coming back to, coincidentally, the land of Israel. Isn't that weird? And sure enough, what we see today is verses 15 through 22 of Ezekiel 37 coming to pass. Verses 23 through 28 have not yet happened, where they're all worshiping one king, where the king is established, where they've gotten rid of their sins and they're following God wholeheartedly. That has yet to come. But up through verse 22, we've seen fulfilled in our own time. But that's not all. On May 15th, one day after the creation of the state of Israel, in other words, this nation is now 1 day old, the Arab armies of, count them, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Lebanon, that would be all the surrounding countries, invaded the new Jewish state. If you know anything about military, I see military guy kind of down here, a few military guys. Fighting a war on one front is difficult enough. Fighting a war on two fronts, what? A little bit more difficult. How about 6 fronts? How would that be? On a nation that is 1 day old, who's going to win? It's a no-brainer, right? The 6 nations are going to wipe them easily because it's a 6-front war. A 1 day old nation, they're not coordinated, whatever. They have no chance. The Arab forces were significantly larger than Israel's and were better equipped, of course. Yet, coordination and organization were lacking, and the Arab armies were often at odds with each other, seeking to incorporate territory from Palestine into their own states. And again, I read that, and I think, at first I just read over it, and yeah, okay. And I think, wait a minute, these guys have obviously coordinated a little bit. They all have a common enemy. What would cause them to go into such chaos and confusion that they start battling kind of against themselves? I almost seem to remember other stories like that in the Bible where God throws the enemy in confusion and they destroy each other. That's weird. What are the odds? Despite their small numbers, the Jews were well organized, well disciplined, and well trained. The war was marked by long periods of fighting and temporary ceasefires, but finally, fighting officially ended on January of 1949, at which time Israel held the 5,600 square miles allocated to it by the UN, plus an additional 2,500 square miles. They increased their own landmass by 50%. They not only won, they not only defended their borders, they expanded their nation by 50%. Transjordan held the eastern sector of Jerusalem and the West Bank, and Egypt held onto the Gaza Strip. By all rights, they should have been annihilated. And somehow, they not only rejoined as a nation after 1,900 years, they beat 6 other nations who simultaneously attacked them. But there's more. Arab states, however, refused to recognize Israel's existence and negotiate peace and maintain a state of war with the Jewish state. They continued their economic attacks. I don't have time to read all this. You can read it for yourself. There's a website up there if you want to look it up. The economic boycott prohibited the Arab peoples from doing business with them. So if we can't destroy them militarily, we're going to do so economically, and we're going to just wipe out their economy so they can't trade and they'll fall apart. How well did that work out for them? They became an economic powerhouse in the Middle East. They're doing very well. They contribute tons and tons to the economy. September 1955, in violation of international agreements and what amounted to an act of war, Egypt sealed off access to the Israeli port of Eilat, however you pronounce it, effectively stopping Israel's sea trade. They tried to isolate the nation, and that didn't work. Continuing tensions. Sorry, I'm flipping through this. We just only have time. 6-Day War. With tensions mounting, the Straits of Tiran blocked, Arab armies poised to strike, Israel decided to launch a preemptive attack on the massive Egyptian forces aimed at war within 190 minutes of little tiny Israel versus the massive Egyptian forces. 190 minutes, that's just over 3 hours. The backbone of the Egyptian Air Force was broken, and by the end of the first day of war, 298 Egyptian airplanes were destroyed. Backed by complete air superiority, Israeli army divisions then thrust into the Sinai Desert, approaching the bank of the Suez Canal. At the same time, Israel issued an appeal to Jordan to stay out of the war. Please stay out of this. Don't attack us right now. Jordan refused and opened a heavy artillery barrage both in the West Jerusalem and the Tel Aviv area, which forced Israel to counterattack. Again, a 2-front war. By June 8th, the Israel Defense Forces defeated the Jordanian forces and captured the whole of Judea and Samaria. What did we just read in Ezekiel 37? Judea and Samaria joining of one stick? That's weird. What are the odds? Syria also had shelled and destroyed a bunch of houses and land and stuff. The 6 days of fierce fighting ended Israel's occupation of the Sinai Desert, ended in Israel's occupation of the Sinai Desert, the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, and the West Bank, providing Israel's cities with a much-needed buffer zone and dramatically reduced the danger of extinction by a surprised Arab attack. Furthermore, victory had special religious meaning because of the unification of Jerusalem and the Jews to Judea and Samaria, which is part of biblical Israel, which is what we just talked about. So they were attacked by Egypt. They said, please, other Arab nations, don't get involved in this. They said, I think we see an opportunity. Boom, all attack. Again, Israel comes out. They not only succeed, they not only defend themselves, they end up acquiring all these other lands clear down through the complete Sinai Peninsula, which again hugely expands their land. Of course, they end up giving it back. You like that or not like it, whatever. But it's extraordinary. It's amazing. It's miraculous. But wait, there's more. And we could go on and on about this. I've cut off slides just because we don't have time to read all the amazing things. The October War began shortly after midday on 1973 when Egypt and Syria, again, two fronts, launched a concerted surprise military on Israel. They'd chosen to attack on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, a day when most Israelis were in synagogues praying and fasting, so that all the armies were off duty that day because of Yom Kippur. They said, hey, good chance to win. Here we go, two fronts, attack, easy victory. Due to the advantage of surprise, Egypt succeeded in crossing the Suez Canal on October 7th, and Syrian forces advanced to the Golan Heights. By October 10th, however, that would be 3 days later, after heavy losses, Israeli forces succeeded in reversing the tide of battle in the north. And during the next 3 days, Israeli forces advanced 10 kilometers beyond the 1967 ceasefire lines into Syrian territory. Again, not only winning, but advancing their borders. On the Egyptian front, Israeli forces succeed in crossing the canal on the 14th and surrounded the Egyptian Third Army. Fighting continued until a ceasefire agreement on October 22nd, which almost brought in other nations to fight, and it continues. Again, against all odds, they succeed. I heard a documentary on Israeli wars once, and they said that typically military people use previous battles as case studies on how to fight and how not to, how battles tend to go and for training purposes. The commentator said, for obvious reasons, it said military trainers refuse to use Israeli war battles as training because the outcomes are so improbable. It never goes this way. We can't even use these as training examples because by all rights, there's no way they should have won. The results and the outcomes are so improbable and so unachievable, we're not even going to use them for training purposes because they should not exist. How does this happen? How does it happen? Personally, I can think of, say, one reason why this would happen. But here's our question. How can anyone explain the existence of the Jewish people, the reformation of the Jewish state after 1900 years, and the continued political and military successes against such amazing odds? It seems like more than mere chance. It seems like destiny. Couple that with the promises made to Israel throughout the Bible, and it becomes apparent who is guiding and fulfilling that destiny. There is no other explanation. And as we look at the news and we can see news article after news article after news article about not only the existence of Israel and the Jewish state, but their continued victory, their continued successes, their economic achievements, their scientific contributions, everything they produce and give to the world. And there's no other nation that has even come back into existence after 1900 years, let alone achieve the amount of success that they have achieved. And that's the one and only nation in the Bible that God says, I will keep them around forever. They will come back and live in the land. I will give them prosperity, and someday they will reunify and they will live together under one king. And it brings to mind a verse to me, or a passage that goes like this. Isaiah 41. Who has declared this from the beginning, that we might know, or from former times that we may say, he is right? Surely there was no one who declared. Surely there was no one who proclaimed. Surely there was no one who heard your words. Formerly I, this is God speaking, I said to Zion, behold, here they are. And to Jerusalem I will give a messenger of good news. But when I look, there is no one. And there is no counselor among them, the false gods. No counselor among the false gods who, if I ask, can give an answer. None of these other false gods can predict and deliver their promises like I can. There is nobody. Behold, all of them are, say the word, false. All of them are false. Their works are worthless, and their molten images are wind and emptiness. There is nobody that can do what I can do, says God. And I love that passage, Isaiah 40 through 48. God, he just kind of lets loose. He says, look, if you can produce another God that can do what I can do, stand up. Let's hear what you got to say. But there is nobody. Nobody can do what I can do. I say it's going to happen. I bring it to pass. I am the real God. I defy you to even come close to doing what I can do. You cannot do it because they're all false. Whew. Modern signs of the times. Undeniable in the headlines every day. And we miss it all the time. Why can we not put two and two together? Because it's not a matter of logic. It's a matter of belief, acceptance, and faith. We've gone through 4 criteria to determine which God is the real God. I think we've pretty well come to a conclusion. I don't know of any other conclusion we can come to than to say, well, that we've made our choice. So, based on these tangible, observable criteria, it is only logical that the God of the Bible is the one who deserves our attention, our worship, and our praise. And we have to say, we have a winner. We have a winner. And we determine that winner not just on blind pool noodle faith. If you haven't been here in the last couple of weeks, you won't know what I'm talking about. Ask me about it later. We've broken it down. We've been as objective and critical as we reasonably can, and still being honest and objective. And there is no other choice than to say, this is the real God. How many of you have ever heard of the flying spaghetti monster? I need a show of hands here, an actual show of hands, if you've heard of the flying spaghetti monster. Nobody? Now, most of you in here are old enough to have remembered this. In fact, I think all of you are. Nobody remembers this. Oh, good. We're in for a treat today. Okay. What we're going to do is look at yet one more belief system, and we're going to use the criteria and the skills that we've developed over the last couple of weeks, and we're going to decide the validity of the flying spaghetti monster. Here's who he is. This is straight out of the current edition of Encyclopedia Britannica. Copy and pasted. I will again read it for you. But I remember when this was a big story. I remember reading about this. I thought, ooh, this is kind of fascinating. The flying spaghetti monster, the deity of what began as a parody religion and grew to become a social movement. The adherents, who call themselves Pastafarians, you get that? Isn't that clever? Yeah, Pastafarians, spaghetti monster, purportedly number in the tens of thousands and are primarily located in North America, Western Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. The flying spaghetti monster, which is said to be invisible, is depicted as a floating mass of spaghetti noodles with a large meatball on either side of its body and 2 centrally located eye stalks. You got the picture? The Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster began in 2005 when Bobby Henderson, a recent physics graduate of Oregon State University, sent a letter to the Kansas Board of Education which was debating the inclusion of intelligent design theories in high school classes on evolution. You get where this is going? This atheistic or agnostic guy, physics graduate, he's full of knowledge and brains. He looks over in Kansas and said, they are trying to institute intelligent design into their science classrooms. We're going to do something about this. So here's what he did. The letter, which parodied the reasoning used to argue scientific basis for intelligent design, stated that teaching about intelligent design must also include the alternative theory that the universe was created by a flying spaghetti monster. Henderson received no response, and he posted his letter on the internet, where it attracted a great deal of popular attention. Articles on the viral sensation were published in numerous newspapers, and fan sites began to appear. And as we said, all right, you Christian, you Bible believers, if you can make up a God and a religion and promote it in the science classrooms, so can I. And so I'm going to come up with one which everybody knows is nonsense, but I'm going to demand the same rights that you Bible believers do because your religion is no better than mine. Anybody can make up a God and promote it as being real. You get this? The tenets of the religion, as laid out initially in his letter, expanded on in his The Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, that's his holy writing, in 2006, posit that the world was created to appear much older than it is, and that whenever a scientist performs a measurement, such as carbon dating, to show the age of an artifact, the spaghetti monster changes the results with his noodly appendage. Similarly, gravity is said to result from the spaghetti monster pushing down on people. Pirates are held to be the first pastafarians, and global warming is explained as being the result of the decline in the number of pirates since 1800s. Everybody get what he's doing here? He's just mocking. Okay. Pastafarians are encouraged to dress in pirate regalia. Friday is celebrated as their Sabbath, and holiday is observed in late December, which is a parody of Christmas. Sure. The code of conduct is laid out in the 8 "I'd really rather you didn't," as opposed to the 10 commandments. Belief is not required of church members, however, and dogma is rejected. Pastafarians have challenged laws that give particular privileges to religious ideas, and here's the point of his whole parody. Practices or bodies of worship in several countries or jurisdictions, frequently seeking recognition as a religion with varying degrees of success. In 2011, a pastafarian was allowed to wear a colander on his head. You know what a colander is? It's a pasta strainer. I mean, clever and witty if nothing else, right? He was allowed to wear a colander on his head for his driver's license photo in Australia. I remember when this news article came out, which permits religious headgear in official documents. They said if the Muslims and the other religions can have their religious headgear in their photos, I should be able to wear a spaghetti strainer on my head and call it a religious artifact. That's what he's doing. It was also the colander was also recognized in other places, including the U.S. states of Massachusetts and Utah. Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster was accepted as a religion in the Netherlands in 2016, and that same year the first legally recognized Pastafarian marriage was celebrated in New Zealand. Now it's kind of cleverly done, and it's humorously intended, and nobody, even the founder, actually believes it because it's meant to be a mocking parody of what we would call true religions. But the question is legitimate. Can somebody just make up a religion and have it be equal to yours? You have a God who's invisible. He has a God who's invisible. Our God created the universe. His God created the universe. Our God decides the physical laws of that universe. His God decides the physical laws of that universe. Our beliefs have certain behaviors that it expects. His beliefs have certain behaviors that it expects. Are the two religions equal? What do you think? How would you answer this guy who came up with the Pastafarians and the Flying Spaghetti Monster? He's not using his noodle, right? Yeah. Good call. Yeah, he's not using his noodle very well. Okay. Very good. All right. Good. Good. Just so everybody can hear, because I know they can't. They said, his doesn't have a son who gave his life for us and redeemed us from sin. And that is true. However, I would counter by saying he could easily invent one. He could easily invent a little ravioli who was born and gave his life in a bowl of spaghetti sauce for the good of all pasta kind. I mean, this is easy to do. I can do it off the top of my head. Is that as legitimate as your beliefs? Why? Ours can be what? This is what we've been working on for the past several weeks, have we not? Yes, this is why this is important. That's why we do all this stuff. So when we see Pastafarian ideas come through, we don't have to say, well, I don't know, I guess he can, we can believe our stuff and he can believe his stuff and it's all okay. It's not just okay, and they're not equal. So let's do it. What are the 4 criteria? And we're going to either prove or disprove the Pastafarians in about our last 3 minutes. We can do it. Criteria 1, historical information. Tell me, when has the flying pasta monster ever interacted in recorded history with humanity, besides an obviously parodied book that a guy came up with? How many times? How many times has he appeared to general humanity and in a documented fashion where he's actually shown himself and manifested himself to be true to the general public? How many times? That would be 0. X number 1. How many times has our God done that? Countless times. Okay. Criteria 2, miracles of the day. Fortunately, his day is our day, because this was only invented in 2005, so it should be fairly easy to discern. How many, I'm not talking like backroom, darkly lit, parlor trick miracles. I'm talking about broad daylight, full spectrum, very public, undeniable miracles has the pasta monster performed to the to the amazement of the general public. 0, right? 0. There are none. There are 0. No miracles to demonstrate the reality of the pasta monster. How many has our God done? Countless. Countless. Okay, we've read through several of them. Criteria 3, prophecies. What has the pasta monster predicted in the future would happen that has come to pass? I don't know. Nothing. How would that be? How many has our God predicted? We just read some huge ones this morning, and there are countless others throughout the scripture we can look at. Prophecies. His, ours, check, bing, done. Number 4, modern signs. Now, his is a little different because his old signs are still modern because he was just invented in 2005. That makes it easier. But still, what modern signs can we see today of lasting evidence of his power and his authority over the universe or humanity or anything as far as the pasta monster goes? What evidence do we have that he is real, that we can look at, that we can document, that we can read in the headlines, that we can see that the pasta monster is real? 0. There is nothing. How many can we see of the God of the Bible? They're all over the place. This is why we study apologetics. This is it right here. So when we see these things, and these things are designed to make us cower in our back closets and say, oh, maybe his beliefs and his religions are as good as mine. Oh, maybe I should be embarrassed. Oh, I should stop opening my mouth and I should be ashamed. And that's what it's designed to do, right? Is it not? To make the Bible believers kind of cower back and pull back and not proclaim what they believe. We can, at least in our own minds, even if we can't do it out loud on a huge megaphone somewhere, we can say, yeah, I know that you're giving me a load of meh because your God doesn't pass any of the tests. Our God is superior to yours in every way, and it's documented, and we can just show you it's all over the place. Your God has a score of 0. Our God has a score of whatever the highest number is, right? That's why we do apologetics.